And there's that song again. The Yesshift theme. Hey everybody, Dan Schinder here with
Steven Schinder.
On
Yesshift.
And we are
a father-son podcast that talks about yes and related stuff.
And today's episode is
the new Trevor Rabin album, Rio, which just got released last Friday.
Yeah, we're very excited. There were some singles that came out, kind of rolled out, and then the whole album came out.
Yeah, and we even talked to Trevor a few weeks back, in case anyone missed that.
Yeah, how long was that? Wasn't that only a couple weeks ago?
Yeah, maybe 3 weeks ago. And I gotta say, I'm really enjoying how hard Trevor and his team are working at marketing this album, because I've seen so many interviews and like these little track by track video clips, and
yeah.
I just love that they're really pushing for this album to be on everyone's minds.
Yeah, I've seen other media outlets pick up other people's reviews and stuff, which is cool. So it's really getting around. That's awesome. Cheers to Inside Out Music.
Yeah. And since you've mentioned Inside Out Music, I guess we might as well mention a little bit of the background that Trevor has mentioned in places, which is basically he took a break from scoring films in order to make time for this album. And when he started making it, he wasn't attached to any label. He was just doing it for himself first, and then when it was finished, he already knew the Thomas Weber, I think was his name, over at Inside Out Music, and that he'd be interested, and he didn't even try having labels compete with each other. And I think that really shows that it really was just for the music, and there's something really pure about that,
I agree. I think that comes out in the compositions and the production and the performance, and I'll kind of point that out, what I mean by that, as we go.
Right. So,
and by the way, folks, I just want to tell everyone, Stephen and I have not talked about this album at all. I have no idea how he feels about it, other than I think I asked you once if you like it, but that's as far as it went. Like that, yes, that could mean a lot of different things. Yes, I like it. Right?
Yeah.
We haven't really talked about it at all. So this is going to be just as fresh as it is for everybody else watching and listening.
Right. So I'll read off the track list real quick. First, we have Big Mistakes, which is about, those mistakes that people make in like young adulthood, I guess you could say.
Oh, I thought it was about bad tuning.
Right. And then we have Push. Again, that was another single. Oklahoma, Paradise, Tondi, which, it shares a name with a rhino, and it's about poaching. Goodbye, Tumbleweed, These Tears, Igole, I think that's how it's pronounced, at least in the song, and Toxic. And there's context for some of these songs that I haven't mentioned, but I'd also like to bring up that there are 3 bonus tracks depending on which format of this you get. My physical copy will contain those bonus tracks, so maybe when I get that, maybe that'll be like a bonus episode talking about the tracks and maybe the packaging. So yeah, but yeah, so 10 tracks. So first off, what do you think of the cover art? And again, this album is named after Trevor's granddaughter, Rio, which is really nice. But what do you think of the cover art, which Trevor himself did?
I think it's amazing. I like it. It's colorful, and to me it radiates Rio. Like when I think of Rio, the culture there and the music and everything, it's colorful, it's festive, it's known for that. And this is really neat. And I don't know the medium that was used. Do you? Is it all digital art? Did he paint it, or?
I've heard him say or read him say that he painted it. So, and funny thing, Rio makes me like, the first thing that I think of when I hear Rio is the fact that Yes played there in Rio de Janeiro in 1985 on the 9012 tour. Funny enough,
The 9012 Everywhere tour.
yeah, that was a big one.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I think it's really cool. It fits with what his aesthetic, I guess you could say. Um, like I don't know. I always think of like splashes of color with like that guitar that's so
I was
iconic
just
that
gonna
he
say
uses,
that.
and also like what he wore on that tour
Yeah.
we mentioned. So I think it's really fitting.
Yeah, definitely. That's cool. I think it's beautiful. It's great.
Yeah. So the first three singles, which we've talked about a little bit, Big Mistakes, Push, and Push being about political corruption, and Oklahoma, which is about the Oklahoma City bombings. So these came out in the lead up to this album's release. Would you say that these singles gave us a good idea of what to expect from the rest of the album?
I'm gonna say no, and I mean that in a good way. So the reason I say that is because there are some big surprises on this album. I think, even though I hear, except for a couple, I hear to some degree classic Trevor in all the tunes, and there's
Mhm.
some like it's a really big surprises. And to me, out of the 10 tracks, I think there's like 7 full albums here. And what I mean by that is, and we talked about this with them before we even heard the whole album, just from the 3 tracks we had heard at that time. We talked about how there's such a variety of music, and he embellished on that a little bit. Now that we've heard the whole thing, there's such a variety of music that there's songs that stand on their own, or a couple that could be pinnacles or branches of complete full separate albums in that sound and that vein and that genre, I think. Does that make
Yeah,
sense? Do you know what I mean?
yeah, I get what you mean. I think for me, listening to the first three tracks as they came out, there was variety, definitely. You know, Big Mistakes is kind of what you'd kind of expect from, well, those youthful rock sounding songs you might hear on the radio. Push felt a bit more like, so Big Mistakes kind of remind me of The Calling in places, and Push felt a little bit like his Can't Look Away album,
I
and
agree.
it went in like lots of different directions. It was very complex instrumentally. Has amazing violin work from Charlie Bisharat
Yeah.
and Vinny. Sorry, what? How do you pronounce his last name?
Uh, oh, Vinny
Caleuda.
Colaiuta.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's not
Um,
spelled right. Vinny Colaiuta, who he's played with Frank Zappa. He played with Steely Dan. He's done so much. He's like the session drummer. You know,
yeah,
he's
so
just
he plays on that song and Lou Molino plays on the rest and does a really great job. But yeah, Push sounded more complex, and then Oklahoma, like I've said, feels like it has those, like it begins with some interesting guitar work that almost feels like a separate piece before going into something totally different that sounds like a film score with Trevor's vocals on top of it, like a score to a film that he didn't work on, if that makes sense. It has that cinematic feel
I
to
picture a
it.
big spread endless prairie. You
Mhm.
know, it just has that feel to that name of the song. But you're right.
Yeah.
It's very disconnected from the other stuff, but in a really good
Yeah.
way.
But I will say that after hearing those songs, I sort of expected the rest of the album to be even more eclectic than it ended up being. Like it has different styles, but I think after hearing how different these three singles sounded, I was sort of expecting the rest of the songs to be super different from each
That's
other, almost like Tormato level in that sense. But no, overall, like they are different styles, and I feel like for the most part, they feel like they're part of the same album, in my opinion.
so I feel a little differently about it. I've heard the 3 singles a few times each. I've heard the whole album all the way through only twice. And
Mm.
I was amazed by how different a lot of things sounded, but I heard a lot of common threads in his style of playing and some of the sounds, even though overall this song sounded pink and this song sounded teal. I heard some sounds in there that were over here. Does that make sense? It kind of threaded it together because that's his sound, his musical aesthetic. So to me, there was like, what's this song? Tumbleweed really surprised me. It didn't sound anything like I thought it would. And Goodbye is
Oh, the country one.
yeah.
Yeah, that one was probably the most surprising
There's
to
two
me.
cowboy songs on here, folks, and Goodbye is one of them. The other one is
I'm
uh
just talking so that there's no dead air in case anyone's only
yeah,
listening.
sorry, yeah.
Um,
What is the other
but
one that was very much like a jig almost, a country jig or something?
um, I mean, Goodbye felt the most like that to me. I don't.
There's
Well,
an
Igole has like an upbeat feel to it. Maybe that's what you're thinking of.
maybe so. I only heard them twice and it was while I was driving. Um,
Okay.
but there's one that has also very much a old school, almost Gene Autry country sort of feel. I hear banjo, I hear fiddle, I hear all kinds of stuff. I did
Yeah.
not expect that. But then like Thandy and Toxic. I love
Yeah.
Egoli if I'm
It might
pronouncing.
be pronounced Tondi from what I looked
Oh,
up, but
okay. Sorry.
yeah.
I don't know. I felt that there was a wider variety of sounds and genres that than maybe you do, but maybe because what's making me think that way is a lot of the production treatments and a lot of the way some of the I think there's one song where almost all the vocals might have been recorded maybe through a vocoder type of processor, something
Mm.
like that. There's a
Yeah,
couple of things that
because
sound very modern and futuristic and digital, which I didn't expect.
yeah, Tumbleweed definitely begins like that, and that was kind of like, oh, whoa, what's going on here? Like it
Yeah.
took me some getting used to. And then later in that song, I think it's in that song, there's like a beautiful piano bit that kind of reminds me of the band Destroyer.
Oh.
I've seen that Trevor was asked if he used autotune, and he said no, and he described the process that he used, but I couldn't like wrap my head around how he was describing. I really should have like screenshot that. That was a goof on my part,
That's okay.
um but yeah, there are parts of this that some of it does feel like a throwback to Can't Look Away, but much of it does feel very now as well, and also commenting on some real life stuff that's happened since then. So
Yeah.
I think it's very well done in that fashion.
There's one song, and I think I'm just going to play a second of it where I think only I'll hear it. Let me just see real quick.
Okay.
Oh, where's Toxic? There it is. One sec. There's
Right.
one song that sounds like I'll say who after I find
Okay. Yeah,
it's
there it is.
yeah, it's not Toxic.
Um,
There's a song I can't think of what song now, but there's this sorry. There's a song that sounded like it could have been a Peter Gabriel song to me. It started out
oh,
very ethereal sort of and
was it These Tears?
yes, thank you.
Yeah, well, I didn't think of that. It actually, like you said, it's very ethereal and gets very emotional. But I
I could
was,
hear Peter singing that.
yeah, I can too now that you mention it. But the music to it kind of reminded me of Holy Lamb. Like you have that dun, 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 like going on in the background. I'm
Background
wondering if anyone else feels that way.
I it felt familiar, and that must have been why. So I don't know. That's the only thing so far that we kind of don't agree on exactly. To me, it still feels extremely eclectic.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah, like I agree it's eclectic, but maybe we each view it to like how eclectic is what we have different views
yeah,
on.
yeah.
Right. Um so what else would Is there anything else that you would say makes this different or similar to other of
Ye-
Rabin's works that we've heard?
yes, there's a few classic things that are Trevor, in the way he picks, especially the acoustic guitar, and the way he picks, and the choice of notes and phrases of the really super clean electric guitar that are straight out of going way back to like as far back as like some of the stuff on Talk and on the Union stuff and that
Mhm.
tour and his acoustic solo stuff. So there's some harking back to that, but it just shows that oh, that is definitely just part of his imprint on that instrument and his style. And I really liked that because it's a big fast forward of bringing all that forward 30, 40 years. And this album, I haven't traveled there yet, but you know how we always say if Tales from Topographic Oceans came out today, it would still sound ahead of its time.
Yeah.
This to me sounds so futuristic that if it came out in 10 or 15 years, I don't think it would sound dated. I'm
Oh,
guessing. It's a
interesting.
guess. But yeah, and part of that is because of the production and some of the instrument and voice processing and the different sounds he's using. Paul Linford was the engineer. I don't know how much input he had on how things sounded, but as a producer, some people might think I'm nuts for saying this, and I don't mean to minimize anyone else's stature or talent or ranking, but I think Trevor is as good a producer as anybody. Ted Templeman, Mike Stone, Trevor Horn. I really think that Trevor Rabin's production skills are absolutely outstanding. And it shows because there's so much eclectic different things going on here and they all sound amazing and they all sound like their own, but they all
Yeah.
like you say sound like they belong on the same album.
Yeah, like I said, there are moments that do make me think of some of his older works, but overall it does feel like there's been some progression. Like it feels very much like the sum of Trevor's journey,
Yeah,
not just working on previous solo albums and in bands, but also as a film score
yeah,
composer. You definitely hear those influences or
definitely.
in there. It's a sum of his experiences.
Definitely.
Um, I see Amy David Valentine commented saying toxic. The intro to that is almost to me sounds very Annerly Road from Jacaranda. Yeah, and
Oh, interesting.
yeah, and and I hear elements of all previous solo albums as well. Okay, interesting.
Yeah, and I do hear that as well.
Yeah,
Those sounds.
Jacaranda was an amazing instrumental album, and it was that album that it came out a few years before ARW finally happened, and I remember Jacaranda was somewhat eclectic as well, and I think it was the album that made you and me think that if ARW were to make an album, Trevor would kind of be the wild card because Jacaranda showed us that at that time he was into all these various different things. Whereas with John and Rick, I think you could kind of guess
Predictable. More.
which direction each of them would go, but Trevor would be kind of the wild card.
I agree. I think John and Rick would probably give us more of what we would expect and predict. And well, I could see Trevor just coloring outside the lines, completely.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um So, what do you think of Trevor's technique on some of these songs, having serious lyrics, sometimes serious subject matters set against happier sounding music? I feel like it's like that with Push. Um, what's the other one?
One about the rhino.
Yeah, Tandi, uh, Igole, and
These tears.
maybe Toxic as well.
Yeah.
So, what do you think of that contradictory technique? It's something he's used in the song "Sorrow" from "Can't Look Away." But what do you think of that technique, like serious lyrics against happier sounding music?
I think it's interesting because, excuse me, I think that it doesn't cloak everything in darkness like you would expect the music to match the lyrics. And I think it might even make the lyrics in a way more digestible for some people because it's the
Mm.
music that's bringing them in, and then you've got that story that might not be what you expect. So I think it's an interesting balance of contrast.
Right. Yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah. I agree. It's definitely like it's not a conventional decision. Although maybe some people will comment and be like, "Oh, well, actually, there are some popular songs that do this as well," and then they'll say which ones, and I'll be like, "Oh, of course." But
Owner of a Lonely
yeah,
Heart.
oh yeah, that's true. Yeah, it's about someone who's like really lonely, but it sounds so upbeat.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I think it's very fascinating because he has these I feel like it shows that he has a great idea of what he wants to say, but also is so gifted with like what type of music he wants to put. And you could tell he put a lot of thought into this. And yeah, I agree, it does make some of those subject matters more digestible, which I guess you would kind of have to do for something like I guess you might in some ways consider this a comeback album for Trevor. It's
Yeah.
been like a decade since he put out a solo album, and this is his first vocal one in 34 years.
Yeah, that's crazy. We talked to him about this, how amazing his voice sounds, and he's 69. And
Yeah.
his voice sounds better than I think on any Yes record or his other vocal solo album. It's truly sounds amazing. I could see why someone at first I was a little like, "What? Why would you ask that?" But now that I think about it, I could see why someone would ask if he's auto tuning, because he's on, and he said he worked on his voice. He started working on it when they did the ARW stuff because he hadn't sung in so long, and that I think, as I think he mentioned, got him in shape for this. But then to lay it down on the tracks, it really is worth it just for the quality of his voice. It's truly amazing. That sounds
Yeah.
so ass kissing. I don't mean it like that. It's
I mean,
it's a
I mean
genuine
it, it's
compliment.
it's true though.
Yeah.
Like,
I'm
yeah, that's
listening and
his
song
voice is
after
just that
song,
good.
he's taking his vocals to another level and layering and really cool stuff.
Yeah, definitely. What would you say are the standout tracks for you? Like, I think all of these are good, but what are your favorites?
1 through 10 pretty much. Um I think Big Mistakes, sometimes the single is the mail in track. It's the most digestible. It's the somewhat vanilla. This song kicks butt, and I think it's a great first track for this because it's maybe a lot of, like you said, what you would expect from him, but better because you haven't heard this yet. So I love that track.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah, and to be fair, when that track came out, it did make me feel like, oh, this is a sound I didn't realize I'd been missing, like that Trevor Rabin sound for
yeah,
like all this time
the
on
whole
something new.
soundscape is him. You're right. I love Push. I love Tandy. Tumbleweed isn't
Yeah.
at all what I expected, and I like that just for the
Yeah, I think that one also kind of reminded me of Sorrow with the way the vocals were at the start.
yeah, it was just not what I expected. It's the snake in the can song. Like, oh, I didn't see that coming. Eagle Eye, Egoli. How do you pronounce that? Do you think?
I think it's Igole.
Okay, and I don't think I could narrow this down to three. Um,
Yeah, and Igole is Zulu for Johannesburg, and it talks about some of the corruption that has happened there. So again, there's like a lot going on with
yeah,
these tracks.
yeah, a lot of social stuff. I found it interesting that he's got the one that refers to the rhinos and the poaching. It seems to be something that he deeply cares about. If you look back
Yeah,
to the miracle of life, you
yeah,
know. So what about you? I didn't do a good job of narrowing it down that much. I think I only left out three
okay.
songs not being my favorites, but I love them all.
Yeah, I think my favorites are Oklahoma is my favorite of the singles.
Really? Oh, of
Yeah,
his three
if
singles. Okay.
yeah, and yeah, like I said, it sounds very cinematic and makes you reflect on the tragedy that happened that day in 1995.
Yeah.
And there's also like I was kind of surprised by this, but Goodbye, even though I don't hate country like at all. I think people give country a bad rap for whatever reason. I like whenever I hear country songs, like sometimes I feel like, hey, this what it's talking about is really resonating with me. But it's not a genre I typically listen to. And on this one, on Goodbye, I was really feeling it. And he's just like jamming and it's fast paced and it sounds like like it has like the country feel that you expect, and then all of a sudden you're blasted with "Goodbye, everybody," and it's so satisfying hearing how he sings that.
Yeah,
Um,
and it country has as much as of an arc as rock and roll. Modern day country, most of it is, in my opinion, um, pop rock with a bit of twang, and
hmm,
then the lyrics, of course. But country to me is Johnny Cash, Gene Autry,
right.
old Dolly Parton. That real old stuff. And
Yeah,
to
I
me,
feel like sometimes it feels like blues, but with a different coat
yeah,
on. You know?
yeah. But some of this stuff, like the cowboy reference I made, because it sounds like hoedown music.
Yeah,
That to
and
me, that's country. That's campfire, dance up a storm, shooting in the air. It's
yeah,
rootin' tootin' fun.
yeah, and these tears is my other favorite. It
Yeah, that's a
like
neat one.
Yeah, like there are moments on certain days when I'm just like, I'm feeling a certain way, and if I listen to that song, it's like I'm really feeling it. It's
Yeah.
so good. Um, if it were up to you, obviously Trevor put a lot of thought into this, and I'm sure there's a method to the order in which the tracks are in, but if you wanted to, would you rearrange any of the tracks
Everything
anywhere?
except the first song. This is just not well thought out at all. I'm just kidding.
What?
That's always a good question. So I'm going to preface my answer by saying, having only heard the album twice, it hasn't soaked in enough for me to really formulate that answer.
Yeah, and I
Um,
feel like I've listened to it maybe 4 or 5 times.
yeah,
So
and I've only heard the whole thing all the way through in a row twice. Um, I don't think it'd be fair for me to comment on that. Sorry, folks, I'm yawning a little bit. It's what time? So it's 6:23 p.m. where we are. I've been up since like 2:10 a.m. I took a 40-minute nap a few hours ago. So sorry. Don't mean for that to be rude or as if Steve's boring me. One thing Steve will never do, get his new book. So, which your shirt matches the color scheme of your new book, by the way. But what about you? Are there things you would rearrange in the order of, and if so, why?
well, for me, I think
It's a just self-imposing question too, by the way, but I like
no,
it.
like I knew this was coming, so I was like already thinking of this. Um, so Oklahoma, with that being one of my favorites, I was kind of wondering if maybe it would be better having it further down in the track list, but then again, you need it as like one of those first few tracks to like
Wake you
really
up out of
get
the blue.
people into it.
Yeah.
So I think after a couple more listens, I'm fine with where it is. I think the only thing I would change is, Toxic, as good of a song as it is, there's something, I don't know, like I'm it doesn't to me have closing track feel to it. I almost feel like, and the I guess this might sound kind of cheesy because it's in the title, but I almost feel like Goodbye might have felt like a good closing
Huh.
track. Maybe put that at the end, but overall, I'm really happy with this, so I can't really knock it for like that reason.
Let me hear the beginning of Toxic again, real quick.
Right. I'm just looking at like our other, yeah, and uh Also, look at the credits again. Dante Marchi and Liz Constantine provided backing vocals on Big
Parody.
Mistakes and Paradise,
Yeah.
and Cindy Alter wrote lyrics for Igole. So there you go. Like various people involved.
Doesn't
Um,
Trevor's son play drums on one song?
that sounds vaguely familiar,
I think we
but
uncovered that when we first got the 3 singles from them.
yeah, I remember hearing about that, but I wasn't able to see him in the credits, so I might have to like dig into that a bit
Okay.
more.
I'm
Um,
curious because he's only like 5.5. I'm kidding.
so, do you have any other thoughts on the album before I ask you these last couple questions I have on this doc?
um, uh, yeah, for a first couple listens of a new album, this has been a huge, like, in your face. I'm not screwing around. This is my first vocal album in 34 years, and it way delivered in every way. And you know how big I am on production. I listen from the first note. The production and this thing is
Right.
just a masterpiece. It really is, and it's very modern. I'd love to know what I want to know. Oh, I'd love to
Phil
know what
Collins.
someone like Trevor Horn would think, or Mike Stone, some really big time
Yeah.
producers, what their opinions would be. We should ask Michael Franklin if he's heard it when we interview him.
Oh yeah.
When's that? Next week or
That's on the 25th.
yeah? We should ask him.
Yeah, maybe we could.
If he hasn't heard it yet, we'll tell him we can hook him up.
Right.
What about
Uh,
you? Any other thoughts before we go to the last couple things?
no, I think I've said all the big things I had to say about the songs. Again, like it really feels like Trevor Rabin. Like if you can tell it's him, and it's really great that he was able to come back for another solo album and really put his stamp on it and like put himself into it. You know.
Yeah. Also, Amy says Spider Boogie kind of gives you a vibe of the direction he went on with Rio.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that
Forgot
was one
about
of the
that.
tracks on Jacaranda.
Yeah.
Um, so if Trevor were to take this Rio album live, like if he were to tour this, and he's been asked about if he'll tour this, and we even
We
asked
asked
him,
him.
and yeah, and it seems like he's waiting to see like what'll happen, and just it seemed like he was focusing on this album first.
Yeah.
But if he were to take this live, which songs would you say are the must plays? Like assuming that he plays a set list that incorporates stuff from other
Oh
albums, what would
God.
you say would be the must plays from this album? And that could be different from what are your favorite tracks on this
Yeah.
album.
For me, I'd say at least half of them. Big Mistakes,
Yeah.
Push, Oklahoma, Toxic, and Goodbye would be fun. I don't know how easy that'd be to pull off. You'd have to have the right band.
Yeah, I think I agree on like it'd have to be like at least half of it, so maybe five of the tracks.
Yeah.
Big Mistakes, since it was the first single and sounds rocking, sounds like a no-brainer. I think Paradise also has that feel. These Tears would sound amazing live. Like you
Live.
said, it would have that live Peter Gabriel-esque feel.
Yeah.
Goodbye could be interesting live, like country in a Trevor Rabin concert.
Yeah. Have him put on a
And
scarf and a cowboy hat.
right, and
Bolo tie.
and maybe Push, like maybe he could pull that off. Like it'd be interesting to see how some of these would translate in the live setting,
Yeah, and Amy says she wants him to mix in the first track on Jacaranda. Do you remember what that is?
I remember how it sounds.
Yeah, me
It's
too. I think that'd be
yeah,
good.
I'm just like trying to look up the track list again. Okay, was it Gazania? Was that it? Um Oh, Spider Boogie, duh. Okay, Google showed me one thing and it was like that doesn't sound right, but yeah, Spider
Yeah.
Boogie.
And Amy, I'm curious if you're still watching. I just happen to hover over your name, and I see that you're married to a Mark Valentine. Is that the? Do you live in Las Vegas by any chance? Is that the Mark Valentine I've known for years? Just curious. I haven't spoken to him in a while, so I don't know if maybe there's been a change of. Anyhow, I'm just curious.
Right.
Great
Um,
album. I'd love to see him tour.
yeah. So, do you have any expectations for potential future releases from Trevor?
Yeah, I'd love for him to keep making albums, and I'd love for it to be not too dissimilar from this, but just as explorative and future pacing as far as, okay, I'm going to take what I've done and bring some of that with me, but do something, refashion the stamp, if you will. Does that make sense?
Yeah, because it sounds like he's open to doing another vocal album, and it'll be interesting to see if it feels somewhat like this or if it'll feel totally different.
Yeah.
Um, and Jacaranda 2, another instrumental album, sounds like it's still in the cards, possibly.
That would be
Um,
great.
and he's also talked about how he and Rick Wakeman sometimes talk about maybe someday they'll do like a duet album where
Huh.
where Trevor's on acoustic guitar and Rick is on piano, but it's a matter of scheduling and geography, so it's kind of tough. So
Yeah.
if that ever happens, that would be interesting to hear.
Yeah, that'd be really cool. Yeah.
Yeah, so I hope this is a good sign of things to come, and I hope that the positive reception encourages him to, keep on like putting out new music, like the stuff that he loves working on, because like it's really refreshing whenever these artists get in a good groove and they're able to put out their ideas in a good pace. Like it doesn't have to be rushed. Like you don't need to rush it to get out. That's the opposite. Like, he took a year and a half to make this one, so take how much time that you need to do the next one and we'll be there to listen to it.
Yeah, and I'm curious if he'll go from this to a tour to the next album or do cinematic work in between any of that.
Right, because he took a break from films for this, and he also took a break from films for ARW. So that really shows that he's willing to change up his priorities to what's drawing him at the moment.
Yeah. Overall, I think a great album. I love that he did the cover art himself as well. That's kind of cool.
Yeah, so folks, definitely check this out if you haven't already. And yeah, I'm sure there's something for everyone here. Definitely, it's a
Yeah.
great album.
Yeah. Cool. Thanks everybody for joining us. Steve, tell them where they can follow us and contact us.
Yeah, you can find the audio at anchor.fm/yesshift. There's also a support button. You can email us via yesshiftpodcast@gmail.com. Follow us on facebook.com/yesshift, where we go live and also post about various things like upcoming shows and what's going on in like the Yes sphere. And you can also find these videos posted afterward on youtube.com/@yesshift. So yeah, thanks for following what we do, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks everybody.